but I'll take some questions.
Mike, you've got stuff in here that the NDP has not promised. You've got in here that the NDP are proposing a 4-year BC hydro rate freeze. They have not promised a 4-year hydro rate freeze. You've got in here that they've promised a 4-year ICBC rate freeze. They have not promised a 4-year ICBC rate freeze. So you just said about the importance of people getting the facts. Why are you including this stuff when they haven't promised it?
Well, if you look at their platform, they're certainly indicating that they're going to freeze rates. I've heard them say
4 years.
I've heard them say. Well, what are they saying then?
Well, they're promising a 2-year freeze on hydro and a review of ICBC rates.
And
they have not promised a 4-year freeze.
And a freeze.
Why do you have that in there?
Well, so what are they
Why
promising?
Why do you have a $2 billion increase of costs for a 4-year ICBC rate freeze when they haven't promised that?
All we can rely upon, Michael, is the information that they have laid out in their platform, which is that they're going to freeze the rates.
Not for 4 years, Mike. It's not in the platform.
So have they disclosed what the rate will be in the 3rd year?
Why is it included in your presentation here today when they haven't promised that?
Because that's the cost that we can calculate. Well, in the absence in the absence of information suggesting what their rates would be, they've said they're going to freeze the rates.
Are you guys going to eliminate MSP premiums? That's your commitment too, right?
Well, you've got our commitment in the budget.
Right. You're going to eliminate MSP
our
premiums.
Objective, hang on, let me finish. Our objective is to eliminate MSP premiums. When we tabled the budget, we said this is what we can afford today. And this is what we can afford over the life of the fiscal plan.
You just said that the NDP are promising to eliminate MSP totally, right? And that it could increase the provincial sales tax or personal income taxes or corporate income taxes. Are you considering those tax increases yourself?
No,
to
Michael.
Eliminate MSP?
No, Michael, and you have asked me that question before, and I gave you
Where's
that
the
answer.
money going to come from
and
when
I gave
you
you the
guys
answer
do
before.
it?
Because we haven't said, we've said this is the objective. By the way, I saw something from one of your channels that Carol James is saying there's going to be an income tax increase to pay for this. We've set an objective, but we have also said this is what we can afford to do today. This is what we can afford to do over the next 3 years, and we don't anticipate any further reductions unless our economy were to grow beyond what we anticipate in the fiscal plan.
Have you not promised to eliminate MSP?
We have set that as an objective, and we have included.
Yes, you have. And how are you going to pay for it? Why do you say the NDP have got to jack up the provincial sales tax and corporate taxes and personal income taxes to commit on to deliver the same promise that you've made?
Michael, I've done 5 of these. I've done 5 of these. I've done 5 of these. They're budgets. All 5 of them have been balanced. All 5 of them have withstood scrutiny from the Auditor General. All 5 of them have been scrutinized by nonpartisan agencies that assess our performance. And as a result of that, we are said to have the most transparent and clearest financial reporting. And that's a record I'm proud of, Michael. All I'm saying, Michael, is if you make the unequivocal promise that you're going to eliminate something, which is different than what we've said.
You're not making an unequivocal promise to eliminate MSP? You might not?
I didn't in February.
So you might not eliminate
Well, I don't
MSP.
think you were listening in February, Mike. You're going to have to spend more time with you.
What is your position on MSP?
You know what our position is. It's right in here.
You're going to eliminate it?
It's right in here, Michael.
What is it?
It's right in here.
Are you going to eliminate MSP? Is that the position?
Shall I do this for the 7th time, Michael?
You tell me.
Have some questions? Not to stop you, Mike, but
I got more.
MSP. Just say yes or no.
So in the budget, we reduced MSP, cut it in half for millions of British Columbians. That's what we said we could afford. It reduces revenue by just over $900 million. We'd like to do more. We're not in a position to do more. Our objective is to continue to reduce MSP premiums until they've been eliminated. I'm not sure what problem people are having understanding that. What I disagree with, let me finish.
You spent years raising MSP premiums.
Let me finish. One question at a time. What I disagree with is saying to people, here's what we're going to do. We're going to eliminate something and not be forthright about how you're going to pay for it. That's what I disagree with.
Another question I have is about the credit rating and the obsession with having a good credit rating. Moody's has criticized your government for the way you've handled BC Hydro and the management of that. So what do you say to that as far as if you're not watching how you're spending your money, how do you expect British Columbians to keep voting for you?
Yeah, I actually disagree with you. What they've said is that they are watching BC Hydro as you would expect they would. BC Hydro is embarking in the single largest public infrastructure project in our history, a project that our opponents are opposed to, and I guess would put people out of work in bringing to an end. But you would expect a credit agency to be watching that, and we're glad they are, and we're also happy with the continuously positive reports we get from those agencies.
Aaron? Mike, I mean, this is a great show. You're standing there criticizing the NDP's budget, basically line by line here. You could have done that in several different ways during this campaign. You could have put out an attack ad. You could have done any number of things, but yet here you are going over this budget, or platform rather, line by line. Are you concerned that the NDP's policies here are gaining some traction?
I think these are important questions. And, you know, I started with the observation that I believe, and I've been at this for a while, that these important democratic exercises that we have every 4 years are about ideas and about choices. But people got to have facts to make choices. And I've acknowledged, for some people, the idea of preserving a AAA credit rating won't be as important. For some people, the notion of slipping back into deficit will not be as important. But I do think people are entitled to know the magnitude of what is being pledged in detail and as forthright and honestly as we can. They're not getting that from the authors of the NDP platform. So we've endeavored to provide an analysis of what the cost will be.
You're giving people the sense that this is government announcement, not politicking, not campaigning, and it seems to me there's some optics here that aren't getting properly addressed.
Well, are you suggesting the NDP doesn't intend to do this? That it's just they're just maybe you're right. Maybe these are just promises and they have no intention of advancing them. That's not the impression one gets from Mr. Horrigan, that this is the approach he says the NDP would take in government. And I'm saying, as someone who has been responsible for reporting on these things for the last 5 years, that this is what the consequences of those decisions would be.
John? What would you say, Mike? What would you say to independent economists that we've spoken with, public policy analysts that have looked at the NDP platform and say it is reasonable? What would you say to those economists that say it is reasonable?
Well, first of all, I've already acknowledged that for people who are not troubled by retreating back into deficit financing or are not troubled by significant tax increases, they may not find anything troubling about this. That is not today my issue. My issue today is that people deserve to have the facts about the consequences of what is being proposed. And to suggest that all of these things can happen and that there is not a consequence that will ultimately befall the BC taxpayer is misleading.
Over here, and then we'll get to Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you. So with regards to something like ICBC, surely you can understand that British Columbians are facing an ever-increasing cost of living. As the party of free enterprise, why not take a bold step and open up ICBC to competition for primary auto insurance and give British Columbians a choice that possibly could save them some money?
Boy, I could create a real headline today, couldn't I? We're not anticipating and not proposing a significant restructuring of the approach that is taken to the Crown Corporation and the provision of automobile insurance. That doesn't mean we're not looking at ways to reduce the cost structure within the corporation and find additional find additional savings, but we are not proposing as part of the election campaign or the platform structural change of the sort that you're suggesting.
One follow-up question. Your concerns about deficit and debt, you've given the example of Alberta, but what about the fact that the federal government is running massive deficits now that they promised not to run? How important is BC staying to balance going to be for this province, given what the burden that the British Columbians are facing from the federal government?
Yeah, I learned a long time ago that it's governing a province like British Columbia is complex, complicated, and you got a lot on your plate. And we try to take care of our own knitting, and we try to bring an approach that we think is in the best interests of British Columbia. And that approach is built around the principle of not spending more than we receive. Now, there are exceptions to that. The Grand Recession of 08-09, we made an exception to that. But, we have the leading economy in Canada right now. We've been tracking along at growth in excess of 3%. I mean, it'd be interesting for you folks to talk to some of those economists. The ones that I sometimes hear advancing the notion of deficit financing generally do so, generally make that argument for periods of time when the economy is sputtering along. That's not the case in BC. We're doing pretty well. So I shudder to think what the NDP approach would be at times when we do encounter difficulty, if this is the approach that they're proposing to take when we're leading the nation in economic growth.
Jeremy first, Mike. And then Jesse.
You got any water?
Mike, you talked about the leading economy in Canada, and every time we hear that on our station, we get people saying, when do I start to get my share of that? A lot of listeners, older listeners, seeing their adult children leave with their grandchildren because they cannot afford to live in BC anymore. It is just too expensive for so many of them. At some point, this government needs to address that. The NDP, however flawed you may have found it, has found a way to, or says it has found a way to do that. What is your plan to fix that problem where we've got this perception that it is just too expensive to live here?
Well, you see that reflected both in the budget and the platform document, where we have taken steps to reduce, for example, a family's MSP premiums by $900 a year, just by way of one example. What we are not prepared to do, however, is play a shell game where we say, and we'll reduce costs over here, but collect it back from you elsewhere. That we're not prepared to do. We've taken steps on the housing front. I mean, today, if you are a family purchasing a home for the first time, you qualify for upwards of $45,000 in assistance.
But that's debt. That's more debt on people.
Well, actually, only a portion of it is, because the fact that we have eliminated the property transfer tax in most cases for first-time buyers and for purchases of newly constructed homes, that's not debt. That's direct savings into the pockets of people. Now, would you like to do more? You always want to do more. But how honest is it to say to people, create the mirage that we're going to do all of this positive stuff over here, only to come along 6 months later and say, by the way, the provincial sales tax has to go up 2%, or the personal income tax has to go up 20% across the board. That's not what we're prepared to do.
But you're saying that. They're not saying that. You're suggesting that that's what they're going to do.
Well, they're not saying it. They're not saying anything. They don't want people to talk about how they're going to pay for this stuff.
I think Jesse has a question, and then gentlemen, we'll end with you, Mike, if you have the last. Jesse.
How concerned are you when you saw that Elections BC came out today and said that your party's returned, I think it's more than $170,000 in illegal donations, which appears to be about double what was previously reported?
Haven't seen the report, and I've been working on this, so I'd have to look at the report.
Mike, in the last election, you guys...
Mike, can we just go to Gemma and then we'll end with you?
It's a big finish, Mike.
Just following up on Jesse's question, Elections BC said that there was 191 indirect political donations. Were they all indirect political donations?
Yeah, I'm not in a position to, I haven't even seen the report, so.
In the last election, you guys promised $1 trillion LNG industry, and Christy Clark rode around on a bus that said debt-free BC. You guys talked about possibly eliminating the provincial sales tax from LNG. The debt's gone up $10 billion since then. The election before that, you guys told stakeholders you were not planning a harmonized sales tax, and you brought it in anyway. I'm just wondering, given that record, what people should think about you criticizing someone else's promises.
Well, Michael, we set as an objective, to use one of your examples, the establishment of a new industry in British Columbia. It has begun to occur, not at the rate that we want it to. Billions of dollars has been invested. I'm not going to be apologetic for the fact that we see the future as including the export of natural gas in liquefied form. That means jobs for tens of thousands of British Columbians, both in the upstream and along the coast. It hasn't occurred at the rate that we would like it to, but we have major proponents who have secured all of their approvals and who are in the process of finalizing decisions. So I'm not as contrasted to a group who seem hostile and dismissive of the notion. That hardly strikes me as something that we should be.
Still your commitment to eliminate the debt?
Well, you know, I thought I might get the question. I purposely put the slide on, I can put it back on, about the operating debt, which is a subset of taxpayer-supported debt. Now, I remember when we were talking, I guess 4 years ago, 4 years and 3 months ago, there was a tone of ridicule when I said we're going to balance the budget. That is a prerequisite to reducing and eliminating debt. That's the first step. And I was confronted by a group who were skeptical and said, you're not going to do that. That's just rhetoric. It's not going to happen. We've done it 5 times. Confirmed. Not Mike DeYoung. We've done it 5 times. I mean, I hope you accept that and accept the Auditor General's. People said it wouldn't be done. We said we were going to reduce the operating debt. Put the slide back up. We are within 3 or 4 years of eliminating the direct operating debt, those accumulated operating deficits, for the first time in 45 years. The last time BC didn't have a direct operating debt was in 1975. That is a second prerequisite to tackling taxpayer-supported debt. And by the way, as between the fiscal year that just ended and the year prior to that, taxpayer-supported debt in total decreased year over year.
Do you rule out any kind of value-added tax in the future? We're not going to see an HST again, are we?
No, what you've seen, Mike, is the Commission on Tax Competitiveness. You've seen their recommendations, and I've said I think there is merit in exploring some of those ideas. That will involve a pretty comprehensive discussion with British Columbians. But that's yes.
What's the plan for the capital debt? Is there a plan?
Sorry?
Is there a plan for the rest of the debt, the capital debt? The promise?
Well, first of all, you've got to arrest its growth, right? And I can tell you, it is our objective is to see it reduce, not increase. And as I've shown you today, that is not the approach the other folks would take. And you know, they continue to criticize us at the same time as making plans to add $18 billion in additional taxpayer-supported debt. So.
But if you don't get an LNG industry, is there a backup?
Well, remember, everything we've accomplished so far, we've done without the major project investments. Now, we've seen some minor, some smaller projects proceed, but what we've been able to do so far, we've done without those major $20 and $30 billion investments. So that, and I've never included that in our numbers. I've never preemptively tried to count that. When that occurs, assuming it does, that's additional positive. But I will say this. Its chances of happening are exponentially greater under a BC Liberal government than an NDP government.
Could I just quickly ask you if you have plans to reduce the foreign buyers tax to 10%?
No. Oh, is that right? Well, there's a short and sweet answer.